Thank you so much, Abdurrahman. I would like to welcome both Ms. Susanna Terstal and His Excellency, also Daniel Shapiro. Thank you both for joining me today, Your Excellencies. And I would like to welcome you both, and we're looking forward actually to hear from you your perspectives about the potentials of what actually EcoPeace is trying to promote in terms of the Green Blue Deal in the Middle East, and how it would actually impact peace building, influence cross-border cooperation, and of course also provide some trust building measures. I would like to start with a question to Her Excellency Susanna Terstal. Let me first express how ignited we are with the European Green Deal and the commitment of the EU to actually put the stimulation plans and strategic transition goals towards a green transformation in the economy and the society in Europe, and we salute, of course, this move. And this is actually what inspired us as EcoPeace Middle East. But potentially now, if we could shift a little bit forward with in the discussion with Your Excellency about your opinion of how initiatives like initiatives and civil society organizations like EcoPeace and like the Green Blue Deal that we're proposing could actually foster further peace building and of course also empower the people of the region to basically move forward with a peace process that is just and fair for a long-term vision. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Nada. Let me first say that I'm very happy to be here, and I admire the work that your group is doing here in Europe. We know better than anybody else how important it is, because climate change and environmental damage doesn't know borders. And I come from a country that is at the end of all the rivers, so I surely know what pollution can do, and how borders have no influence on that. But let me start a little bit on our own Green Deal. Our commitment to the Green Deal is here to stay, and it's a growth strategy and a commitment of the Union to invest in a sustainable future together. And we're also putting that into law. And having a stimulus package to address the economic crisis after the outbreak of the pandemic. This will also be guided by the Green Deal. At the same time, our common foreign and security policy remains centered around our shared values to preserve peace, strengthen international security, promote international cooperation, and developing and consolidating democracy, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. And as your report rightly shows, investing in climate adaptation and building on water and energy cooperation are important instruments to enable peace, and therefore also to enhance stability and security across the world. One way in which the Green Deal affects our external relations is through the European External Investment Plan, the EIP. And it will encourage investments in partner countries to promote inclusive growth, job creation, and sustainable development. And for example, yesterday, we launched this platform for policy dialogue with the Palestinian Authority, European financial institutions, and local and international stakeholders. This prioritizes green investments, including renewable energies, and enables better coordination and synergy. The EU and many of its member states are, of course, already involved in initiatives that enhance cooperation on the water energy nexus between Israel and the Palestinians. One example is, for instance, the Gaza's central desalination plant. This has the potential to provide safe drinking water for 2 million Gazans. We choose to invest in hope and stability, and we work on this together with the PA, Israel, other Arab donors, and also countries like Turkey. Now, you asked me about building trust. This has not been an easy year for the relation between Israel and the Palestinians, and not only because of COVID. Without a negotiated agreement between both parties, there will not be an end to the conflict. However, negotiations can only take when there is a level of trust. And I believe there might now be a new momentum to rebuild trust. We have welcomed the news that the Palestinians have resumed civil and security coordination with Israel, and that Israel has also transferred the clearance revenues. I think they transferred them today. And the Green Blue Deal shows valuable proposals for building trust on the basis of the water energy nexus. And this is important also because of the commitment by Israel, the PA, and Jordan to transition to renewable energy. They have a shared interest in working together on climate adaptation. It has the potential to be a win-win-win. And the next step, of course, is how to leverage this cooperation and trust towards the resumption of negotiations on the other aspects of the conflict. Let me leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. This is truly very inspiring to hear from Your Excellency about the Green Deal of the EU and how it actually corresponds somehow to what we're trying to do here in the Middle East. I would like to shift now to Your Excellency, Mr. Shapiro. We are now seeing some kind of shift in the new administration with now President Biden starting to settle down into the White House. Clearly, there's a big shift in terms of the environmental, towards environmental justice and climate change. And we've just recently heard the appointment of Mr. John Kerry as a special envoy on climate change. And it's actually the highest rank in the US officially to ever have a portfolio specifically and exclusively devoted on climate change. We're seeing also that the US is trying to also get back into their seat, into the Paris Agreement. I think this is a major shift, a major change, not only for the US, but I guess also for the US administration's foreign policy. How do you think all these changes could actually influence the US administration's foreign policy towards the Middle East, and of course towards the role now if they would take on again also their role into the Middle East peace?
Sure, thank you, Nada. It's great to be with you and EcoPeace Middle East, and an honor to be with Susanna Terstal as well. You're absolutely right that there are many themes of the incoming Biden administration that resonate very closely with EcoPeace's Green Blue Deal for the Middle East. And as one reads that report and one listens to the presentations during the campaign and now during the transition of the Biden team, you really hear a lot of overlap. And the first of those, of course, is the centrality of climate change to the agenda of the Biden administration. You know, when right after the election, when the Biden team launched the transition website, there were 4 issues highlighted that had clearly been worked on during the campaign and were immediately elevated to the 4 most central priorities facing the incoming administration. One, of course, was the coronavirus, managing the pandemic and providing all the necessary guidance and rules and materials and supporting healthcare, and then getting ready for distribution of vaccines, which has both a domestic and an international component. Second, of course, was a recovery from the economic crisis that has accompanied the pandemic, which also has both a domestic and a international component. Third was the reckoning for greater racial justice in America, something that came to the public's attention, renewed attention, I guess, after the murder of George Floyd this summer and the protests that followed. And the fourth is climate change. That says a lot about what President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris think are the priorities they were elected to advance, and what they believe they will be judged on by the American people. So, of course, there are some specific commitments related to that. One is the commitment to rejoin the Paris Accords on the first day of the Biden administration. That is symbolic and meaningful, but also representative of a return to U.S. leadership on this global issue that can obviously only be addressed through cooperation between nations, not anything that respects borders and anything that any one nation can address. And of course, the creation of a new cabinet appointment with a seat at the table at the National Security Council with a former Secretary of State, John Kerry, fulfilling it is a further indication of the emphasis and the importance and the salience of this issue to the Biden administration's agenda. Now, as I said, the climate change is, of course, a global issue. It has a domestic component in terms of how we address our own energy resources, how we address our own economic structures to support the shifts that will be necessary to change, to reverse the effects of climate warming. But of course, it does connect to these other priorities. A warming climate is likely to open the doors to new pandemics that will need to be prevented, and if they occur, managed. It connects to this broader desire for U.S. leadership and reconnecting with allies who have become somewhat estranged during the last 4 years. But it's not just a global issue. It has local effects. Climate change has local effects in every region of the world, in every country of the world, and it is frequently a driver of conflicts in regions where it is being felt in the most acute ways. Certainly in the Middle East, that is the case, and a major effect, local effect of climate change is, of course, water scarcity, and that need to address it and to address it actively and creatively, and using new technologies that are coming to market but have not yet scaled to where they have really had the impact that they can have, to link the use of those technologies for addressing water scarcity with the new renewable energy sources and the technologies that drive those, which are also scaling more or less at the same time. And to do all of this in ways that empower the local communities that are affected by these local effects of climate change. In this case, with EcoPeace's report, Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian communities that are all affected by shared but declining water resources. And doing all of that while creating the economic growth and the jobs that are generated by investing in these new technologies. This is in the American context is what President-elect Biden is calling his Build Back Better agenda. That is the ultimate opportunity that is presented by this moment. And I believe we have an administration coming in that is really prepared to seize that opportunity. There's one additional opportunity, which I'll mention briefly now, and then maybe in the next round, we'll talk a little bit more about the Israeli-Palestinian specifics. And that is the opportunity for joint action between the United States and its European partners, which is why I'm so pleased to share this panel with Susanna Terstal. As President-elect Biden has said throughout the campaign and since the transition, and it's been evident by the phone calls the first phone calls he's made with foreign leaders, he is a deep believer in the importance of America's alliances, and particularly the transatlantic alliance. And there are so many aspects of that that need repair around NATO and the commitments of those nations, around dealing with the challenges of Russia and China, around restoring the U.S. as a central player and the leader in the climate change agenda. But that includes partnering with our European allies in those local theaters, or those local or regional situations where we have the relationships and the resources and the partnerships to actually make a difference. And I believe this is clearly a case that the European and American partnership to help Palestinians, Israelis, and Jordanians address the water challenges they face through all the means that I mentioned earlier is one of the great opportunities that we also see in this moment.
Thank you, Your Excellency. This was really inspiring, and I think we really will touch again further on in details about the Palestinian-Israeli issue in our next round. But let me turn now to Your Excellency, Ms. Susanna. We have heard previously from you now that there's new momentum in the Palestinian-Israeli relations. Also, you've been here in the region for several times. You've obviously discussed with Palestinian and Israeli leadership and civil society and political activists, several priorities and aspirations for both peoples in terms of their needs to come into a resolution to this conflict. Do you think, in your opinion, that something like the Green-Blue Deal, and do you think that any of its elements that we are proposing could actually be something that would capture the ears and interests of, both peoples? Could it actually be a catalyst for something that would actually also influence and support your work as a mediator?
Yeah, thank you, Nadia. Nada, I first want to confirm that those partnerships that Daniel was talking about are, of course, also very, very important to the Europeans. But you asked me about my my experience on the ground and how I interpret that. Well, what I ended with in my last intervention is that what I find so interesting about this Green-Blue Deal is that it gives a win-win potential for this area of cooperation. In that respect, I think timing is crucial. Globally, you see a shift now towards renewable energy and sustainable investments. Most countries now come up with their own version of a Green Deal. Even countries like China, they have ambitious policies for the environment. Now, High Representative Borrell has welcomed the intention of President-elect Biden as well to accompany European efforts in climate diplomacy. And also that Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority have committed to this transition for climate adaptation and mitigation is important, especially because the Middle East is one of the warmest places and is also water poor. And I've seen that with my own eyes traveling through the West Bank and being in the region. So it is the right time to prioritize the water energy nexus as an entry point for building trust between the parties. And we have the instruments to be a partner in doing so. I mentioned the EIP previously, but we really want to be a partner in many ways for sustainable peace, development, and economic growth. And to identify those measures to build trust among the parties is an important part of my work. Also together with the other members of the quartet. And your recommendations are definitely important for this work. How we exactly can shape that, we really have to work on that and see how we can do it. But I was very interested in reading your report, and I think it gives a lot of entry points in which we can do that.
Thank you, Your Excellency. This is really great. And maybe in the final words after we finish this round, it would be nice also to listen to your recommendations on how to do so. Your Excellency Shapiro, now whether the new U.S. administration takes, a stroll into some sort of Palestinian-Israeli negotiations track or just foster a new way of managing this, conflict over the next 4 years, what could potentially be some of the key elements which potentially the U.S. administration could utilize from our Green-Blue deal in the Middle East as to, capture interest, as to advance the geopolitical atmosphere here between Palestinians and Israelis?
So first I would say, and I don't of course speak for the Biden transition, I have no official connection to it, so I'm speaking on my own behalf. It would seem to me that the Israeli-Palestinian issue and the issue of trying to advance toward a two-state solution may not be the highest priority issue on the administration's plate. I mentioned the 4 issues they chose to highlight early on, and if you zoom out internationally, you think of China, you think of Russia, you think of restoring alliances, you think of climate change, and a number of other challenges, from refugees to non-proliferation to pandemics that are transnational in nature and are different from the more traditional kind of diplomatic focus on resolving conflicts and the like. Those are all going to be very, very high priorities. But it's also the case, and President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris spoke about it during the campaign, that they continue to believe it's crucially important to the United States, to our own interests, as well as to those in the region, to continue to work for a two-state solution between Israelis and Palestinians. Now, that may or may not mean an immediate return to negotiations. A lot will depend on an assessment that new administration will make about the leaders and the political circumstances in the region, whether it's wise to immediately go to negotiations. But the goal, at least initially, is to keep that two-state solution alive and viable for the long term at a time when many people are doubting its viability and even despairing that it is even still achievable. They believe, and I agree, that it is achievable, but everything needs to be done from this point forward to sustain that viability for as long as possible. Now, there are a lot of elements to that. Of course, the resumption of Palestinian-Israeli security cooperation is important. The insurance of viable Palestinian economic circumstances is important. The ability to persuade both Israelis and Palestinians not to do the things that have often been harmful to prospects for two states, whether that's delegitimization and support for violence, or whether that's settlement expansion and proposals for annexation, is also part of that. But there's absolutely no question that addressing Israeli and Palestinian, and by the way, Jordanian water needs is also part of that, and can be done ahead of any negotiations on any other final status issues. And if indeed adopting proposals like those in the Green-Blue deal were to take place, that would contribute significantly not only to addressing those water challenges, but also to the goal of advancing a two-state solution, maintaining its viability, shortening the distance between wherever we start the next negotiations and a successful outcome by addressing that very important issue. It's also a way to capitalize on the newest development in the region, which has been the normalization of relations between the UAE and Bahrain, and the potential additional normalization of other Arab Gulf states and other Arab states with Israel. Especially the states with resources would find themselves in a position, and I think would be encouraged by the United States, to invest in a more peaceful future for Israelis and Palestinians. And there are many ways those investments can take place, but certainly that includes the wider deployment of the water technologies and conservation and management techniques that are highlighted in the Green-Blue Deal report, fueled by renewable energy sources that would also be targets for investment from those same countries, and supporting the education and entrepreneurship programs that will advance them, that have also been highlighted in the report. Those are opportunities for those states now normalizing their relations with Israel to spur the broader dissemination of technologies that are going to benefit them, as well as Israelis and Palestinians, on both environmental and peacemaking agendas. And obviously, if those technologies become even more viable for global deployment, it can really have a great benefit throughout the world. So there's many opportunities to take the ideas of the Green-Blue Deal, apply them to this principle that the Biden administration comes in with, which is keeping two states alive and viable, shortening the distance between the next negotiations launch and that outcome, and capitalizing on the latest and most positive trends in the region between Israel and Arab states.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. This is really important, especially that you've also highlighted the changes of the regional dynamics, and you've also added the element of Jordan and the new agreements with the Gulf countries. I think this definitely adds up something different into the equation, particularly also for the U.S. administration to maneuver around. I would like to give both of you, Your Excellencies, maybe the last 2 minutes, each one of you, to just give us a recommendation. How do we move forward? I mean, it's, as a concept, it's really theoretically, it makes sense. Everybody from, all our speakers, they've said that it does make sense. But how do we move forward as EcoPeace in practical steps? How do we make also, how would our countries move forward in these issues in practical steps? Her Excellency, Susanna? Okay, so yes, here she is.
Yes, here I am. Sorry. Maybe first a word of caution. It is a process that will take time. We know from our experience. You have to start the projects to be more concrete. You have to start the project. You have to talk to people. You have to find the financing. And of course, we can support you in a lot of those steps, but the initiatives basically have to come from you. You have to convince your own policymakers that this is a good idea, and in the other countries as well. So it's a process that takes time. Like we did not build the European Union overnight, and not even the steel and coal community, which started the whole process. And with that word of caution, I also want to say something else, and it reflects already something that Daniel said as well. It is important in the meantime for both parties not to take unilateral steps, such as the construction of illegal settlements. It's also important to work on enhancing the legitimacy of the Palestinian leadership, achieving Palestinian reconciliation. Those are all important conditions if you want to work on confidence building measures, and if you want to preserve the two-state solution. And I think one can lead to the other. Like we evolved from a community of coal and steel to a European Union. You can move from all those projects under a Green-Blue deal to more trust, to restart of negotiations. But you have to look at the other issues as well. So it is refraining from unilateral steps. It is looking at Palestinian state building. It is reconciliation. It is the situation in Gaza. So I really applaud, again, I really applaud all the work that you have done. Don't stop. That is my most important recommendation. Continue, and we will really see how we can support this and discuss that further. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Definitely, you put it in the reality perspective. I think this is also very important that we do not exclude ourselves from our reality, and we really read the situation on the ground and see what is possible and how to actually work around it. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Mr. Shapiro. The floor is yours for your recommendations.
Thank you. Well, I would certainly echo all of Susanna Terstal's recommendations. I think the key component that's necessary to elevate these proposals to actual policy is, of course, political leadership. That's a prerequisite, if you will, to taking these wonderful ideas that obviously require focus, require government leadership, require government and private sector investment, and require cooperation between different political entities. Without political leadership, the best ideas in the world will not go anywhere. But I think in addition to the political leadership, or maybe even as a prerequisite for that, is that this the demand for this really needs to come from below. It needs to come from the public. It's not. It's new that an American president, incoming president, would highlight as one of his 4 key priority issues the issue of climate change. In fact, were it not for the coronavirus and the economic crisis that has accompanied it, and the racial justice protests that highlighted an issue we obviously needed to deal with, but brought it to the public's attention this summer, it might be that this would have been the only or the number 1 item on not the only, but maybe the number 1. Now it's one of 4 items highlighted on President-elect Biden's agenda. And that reflects a significant shift in attitudes by the American public. Perhaps not the entire public. There's still much education to do, but a much broader swath of the American public, I think, now understands the risks to the planet, to our own economy, to our health, to our children's future, of not addressing climate change in a very serious and sustained way. And that gives political leadership the push and also the support and the platform they need to elevate this to an issue that would lead to the appointment of a special envoy at the cabinet table, and making this a thread that will run across all government policies. The EU is probably ahead of us in this regard, but I think also similarly is responding to the demands of their own public, who have been educated to really see the risks that are at stake. That kind of education, which is very much part of what's proposed in the report, I think among Middle East populations is going to be critical, because they will need to tell their own leaders, we need to have these questions addressed, these questions of water and energy challenges addressed as quickly as possible. The technologies exist or are coming online. The financing will have to be found, but that's actually a solvable problem. And it should be elevated to the same level as other items on the national agendas of those political entities. It doesn't need to be held back or held hostage by other priorities. In fact, as we discussed earlier, it can be even used to fuel, to actually fuel progress on other priorities. But it really is going to be important that the publics be educated and that they demand from their own leaders elevating this to a policy priority on the level that we've seen in some other locations.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
And thank you again for the opportunity to participate, and again, wish you great success going forward.
Thank you. Thank you for the closing wise words. We definitely believe in the power of the public and the power of the communities and engaging the bottom of the pyramid with us in this process. So thank you indeed, Your Excellency Susanna Terstal, Your Excellency Daniel Shapiro, for this wonderful conversation. We've learned a lot. I will turn it now to Abdulrahman to enter the second part of this session. Thank you very much.